Hey YouTube, Kira Twig here, bringing you all my Polymerization Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck profile for February 2022. Now I know what you're all thinking, this is probably the craziest deck profile that I have ever created on this channel, or at least the craziest idea that I could thought work, but this is such an iconic card. I wanted to focus on a deck that just utilized this card and its many different forms in one deck, whether it be fusion summoning with your opponent's monsters, or just fusion summoning whatever fusion monster you wanted to make. This is the deck profile for it. You use Polymerization and all the other cards that, focus around Polymerization for this deck. Whether it's to get out a big boss monster, an iconic Yu-Gi-Oh! Monster fusion, this deck can do it. So enough of, the talk of Polymerization. Let's jump right into the deck profile of it. So for starting off, we're going to go with the spell cards instead of the monsters, since the main focus of the deck is Polymerization. We're running 3 Polymerization. It's the standard go-to fusion card for a lot of us. It just fusion summons 1 fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as material. And this card is searchable by plenty of other cards. I ran it at 3 since it is the main focus of the deck. We have plenty of fusion targets in the extra deck to use with this card as well. And I also held off on making this deck profile until I knew what the status of Vert Anaconda would be on the February ban list. Now that I know that they didn't even touch it, I went ahead and started this profile. So with the next card being the card that splits up whatever you make with Polymerization, and that is Diffusion. Whether you want to get some of the bigger monsters that I run in the deck back onto the field, or if you just need some other resources to go into a different summon, that's why I like this card. You can even activate it during the battle phase after your fusion monster attacks, splitting up that monster and then giving you 2 more monsters to attack with. Another one of the 3 ofs that I want to run in the deck is Super Polymerization. Now, the best resource for fusion summoning would obviously be your opponent's monsters. So being able to at least take their monsters for a lot of the different monsters that we run in this deck definitely makes this a must-have in any Polymerization deck. Just for the discard costs, being your opponent can't activate anything to it, it's just that good of a card. You have plenty of options when we get to the extra deck for the fusion monsters with this card, and by luck, depending on what you're playing against with your opponent, they might even have one of the cards for the specific fusions we run. And for some of the lower numbers for the spells, I also run 2 Fusion Recovery. Resources are definitely going to be eaten up quickly in this deck because of the fact that it takes 2 cards for Polymerization along with itself to Fusion Summon. So if you can at least get the Polymerization and also one of those cards back to your hand, you can definitely make use of 2 of this in the deck. I don't run too many of these or max out the number because early game it doesn't really do as much. You need that Fusion Summon first before you can even use this card. For more search power for our main go-to card, I also run 2 Fusion Sage. It just adds 1 Polymerization from our deck to our hand. It's just thinning out the deck as well. We do run a good number of monsters to summon out, but you want to make sure that you at least have the fusion card you're going to use with those monsters also. And I also run 2 Fusion Recycling Plant and 1 Terraforming. I'm only running 2 of this card. I always liked it for the number of this card in the deck. Once per turn, you can discard 1 card to add 1 Polymerization from your deck or graveyard to your hand. And during the end phase, you can target 1 monster in your graveyard that was used as fusion material for a fusion summon and add it to your hand, being able to get you that resource back. Even if you add 1 card back, it can specifically be used for another fusion summon. I run some pretty big generic monsters in this deck, along with the other specific ones. And for some of the one-ofs that I run for the other fusion spells, I run 1 Ultra Polymerization. I do run a few Link monsters in the extra deck, so just being able to get those resources back onto the field to reuse for other plays means we can place the fusion monster in the main monster zone with this card, and you don't really use life points for anything else, and then have your fusion monster be in the main monster zone, along with that giving you the other monsters you summon onto the field, so you can then summon out your Link monster. I also run 1 Greater Polymerization. You fusion summon 1 fusion monster from your extra deck using 3 or more monsters from your hand or field, and if you do, it gains these effects. It cannot be destroyed by card effects, and if it attacks a defense monster, you inflict piercing Val damage. It's a pretty awesome card, but I would say just a one-of, because if you're going to go into that fusion monster, you're definitely investing for that one play. I run 1 Revoke Fusion. This card comes up if, your opponent, let's say, dimensional barriers you, and you can't go into a fusion play. At least you can then special summon out some of the other monsters by sending that fusion monster to the graveyard from your hand. And lastly, 1 Dark Factory of Mass Production. I do run a good number of normal monsters, so being able just to recycle those cards back to our hand as well definitely does help for whatever plays you want to do. And that is it For these spells, we'll now move on to the monsters. Now, my choice in monsters for just their versatility and all the different fusions they have is 1 Buster Blader, 1 Dark Magician, 1 Red Eyes Black Dragon, and 1 Summon Skull. Now, Red Eyes Black Dragon can fuse with Summon Skull and Dark Magician to make either Red Eyes Dark Dragoon or, Black Skull Dragon. Buster Blader can fuse with Dark Magician. You can also fuse Buster Blader with your Red Eyes Black Dragon to make your Red Eyes Slash Dragon. You have plenty of options available with just these 4 targets. And we have some other search options in the deck to make these cards. So I just run them at 1-ofs though, because you can recycle the normal monsters with Factory of mass production back to your hand. And they could be used for other cards also, with 3 of the 4 being dark attributes, being able to use them to make cards like Starving Venom Fusion Dragon, or even some of the other cards like Predaplant Drago's Tapelia that I run in the extra deck, along with their own, fusion requirements. For some more special summoning for some of the other normal monsters, I run 3 Rescue Rabbit. This is just to get 2 other normal monsters on the field, which you'll then use for those fusion plays. I run it at 3, just so you can hit some of those bigger numbers, with those normal monsters being 3 Gem Knight Garnet and 3 Evil Swarm Heliotrope. Now, Heliotrope meets the dark attribute for the monsters I might need for some of the fusion plays. Gem Knight Garnet gives me access to some Gem Knight monsters, which I can summon out onto the field using also some of the other rock monsters, which are Heliotrope included. And both of them are targets. If I open up multiple Rescue Rabbits, at least I can go into the Heliotrope one turn, and then the Gem Knight Garnets the other turn. Now, for some of the best search for the Polymerization Fusion cards, I also run 3 Predaplant Orpher Scorpio and 1 Predaplant Darling Tanya Cobra. The special summon of Cobra off of Scorpio, just for sending a monster off of Scorpio, gives us the 2 dark monsters on the field for, once again, a Starving Venom Fusion play. And then Cobra can search out a good majority of the fusion spells that we run in this deck, depending on which one we need for our plays. And then the last of the monsters that I run is just the 1 Lunalight Black Sheep and additional search. Even if you didn't want to run Fusion Sage, you can always take out these 2 copies for 2 additional copies of Black Sheep, giving you an additional monster to use along with the discard for searching out Polymerization from your deck to your hand. But it's player preference on what you wanted to use there. And then for the only trap that I run in the deck, I run 3 Fusion Reserve, just being able to reveal Fusion Monster in your extra deck and add one of the fusion materials for that card from your deck to your hand. Means that with the 4 I spoke of before, you have plenty of reveal and searches to just easily add these back to your hand, and then to also just re-add Polymerization from your graveyard back to your hand for you to reuse. And that is it for the main deck. We'll now move on to the extra deck. I run 2 Predaplant Trivovertum. This monster needs 3 dark monsters on the field. Perfect target for Super Polymerization. Even if you just have 1 dark attribute monster, then you could take 2 your opponent may potentially have using this card. So just taking away their resources is good enough, and why I like running 2 of this card. I also run 1 Starving Venom Fusion Dragon for the 2 dark attribute monsters on the field you control. 1 Greedy Venom Fusion Dragon. You need 1 Predaplant monster, which we have, and 1 dark monster whose original level is 8 or higher. So whether it's Trivovertum or Starving Venom, you can easily make Greedy Fusion with those cards. Same with 1 Predaplant Drago's Tapelia for 1 fusion monster and 1 dark monster. For the normal monsters rerunning, I also run 1 First of the Dragon. Whether you even use, Summon Skull with a Gem Knight Garnet, at least you can still make this card and have a pretty big boss monster on the field. For other targets for these Super Polymerization plays, I run 1 Mud Dragon of the Swamp, 2 monsters with the same attribute but different types. So just another potential resource to take away from your opponent. And for the Garnet plays, 1 Gem Knight Ruby and 1 Gem Knight Zirconia for the rock monsters we run, along with if you Rescue Rabbit with 2 Garnets on the field, you can make Ruby with those cards. For the Summon Skull play, I run 1 Archfiend's Manifestation. Now, this can be used to summon out with Dark Magician and Summon Skull. You can also reveal this with Fusion Reserve to add Summon Skull from your deck to your hand. Dark Paladin for Buster Blader and Dark Magician. The one card I didn't have in the deck was the Black Skull Dragon. If you wanted to run that, you can take out one of the next Link Monster options that I run in the deck. But for those Link Monsters, I run 1 Predaplant Vert Anaconda. I do recommend leaving this in the deck, because not only can you use Vert Anaconda for a fusion play into your Greedy Venom Fusion Dragon, being just needing 1 Predaplant monster, it's just good for any of the fusion search. 1 Reprodocus, I also recommend keeping this in, because this will be used to change your opponent's cards attributes, so you can then use Super Polymerization to go into the other monsters you control, as long as you have it lined up properly with that monster it points to. And 1 Nightmare Phoenix and 1 Nightmare Unicorn to finish off the rest of the extra deck. If you were to put in Black Skull Dragon or even Red Eyes his Dark Dragoon. Take out these last two spots for those. It's just player preference at that point what you want to add in, because they're more specific. They don't work as well with the Rescue Rabbit targets, but if you add the 2 additional fusion monsters, that's definitely your best spot to go for. And then that is it for the deck profile. As for the actual plays, it just revolves around what you open up for the fusion play. If you have the Rescue Rabbit play to get out 2 monsters, then you have your fusion for your Starving Den and Fusion Dragon. If you have the Super Polymerization, you can use your opponent's monsters. If you have the 2 monsters, you can use the Reprodocus that I showed to summon out a card that points to one of your opponent's monsters to change the attribute to the needed card for you. If you have any of the normal monsters, or at least search them out with cards like Fusion Reserve, you have the many combinations that I also spoke of to go into those fusion monsters. You have the Factory of Dark Mass Production. You have the Greater Polymerization to use 3 dark monsters that you may have in your hand to summon out the Trivivertum, giving it piercing and also protecting it from card effects. That's the fun that I came up with this Polymerization deck, and I hope you all enjoy looking into making your own Polymerization decks using this as a guide. And as always, until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and Kira Twig out.